We are very happy to have such a good group of people, and we are especially happy to have Charlie with us from Spain, who is the past president of IACD. So we'll start with him giving us a reflection backwards to look at the evolution of IACD over the 70 years up until now. And then Anna will talk a little bit about going into the future with IACD. And Daniel will give us a little bit of reflection specifically for our region. And then we would like to have, firstly, just a quick open forum if there are any questions and comments on those three presentations. And then we'll put you into breakaway groups to just discuss and talk about engagement with IACD and community development discipline and practice going forward, so that we can sort of see how things are in our region going forward. And then we'll come back into a plenary and share some of the feedback, and then we will call it a day. So thank you very much, Charlie, for joining in with us. Lovely to have you here. And I say over to you. Give us a little overview of the evolution of IACD. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Janine. Thank you, Anna, and thank you, Daniel. Daniel has asked me to speak for about 10 minutes on this so that we can all get into the breakout groups, as you said. I just say a couple of seconds about me. I'm the person who negotiated and led the change to move IACD from Belgium to Scotland back in the late 1990s, but I'll tell you more of that anon. Now, what we're actually celebrating is 70 years of international community development networking, because what you'll find in this story is that this organization has had three distinct yet overlapping phases. And what you'll also find, it's had three different names. So the first was set up in 1953, happy birthday, and it was called the International Society for Community Development. It was based in New York in a building, well, the building's since been demolished, but it's now known as UN Plaza. So as you can guess, it is very close to the United Nations headquarters. And we believe it was the building that also held the office of the United Nations Community Development Division. This acted as its secretariat. And we know that a bit later on, in the late 50s and 60s, the society got support from the Ford Foundation. Now, the leading players, there are a number of leading players, pioneers in our association. Two, I think you may be familiar with. One is William Biddle, who is seen as very much the founding parent of community development in the United States, but also in US international development policies and programs, and is an author, set up some of the first professional community development practice courses that we've seen in the US. Another was T.R. Batten, Thomas Reg Batten, who you may have come across his work. He wrote quite a famous book in the late 50s, early 60s, called The Non-Directive Approach to Community Development. He was based in Britain, but for many, many years, his career was in Africa. Now, we don't know anything, I'm afraid, about the membership structure of IACD at that time. The archives have been lost, which is a great loss. So if anybody knows where they are, please alert Anna in the IACD office. But we believe that its membership did include policy advisors, particularly those within the UN and within member governments, academics, and the emerging practitioners. It worked closely in the 1950s in informing United Nations early policies on promoting community development, and there are a range of reports. You can access these from UNESCO, for example, where you can see reference. It would have to be said that a lot of these methodologies, probably because of the influence of people like Biddle and Batten, there was a sort of an Anglo-American sort of emphasis on this. British policy towards decolonization since the late 1940s had been promoting community development, and the Americans were also very keen on that. I'm not saying that the British invented it. They most definitely did not. There are very, very early ideas we all know and practice in community development, but they were certainly both very influential within the United Nations. So across the Commonwealth, those 52 or so nations of the Commonwealth, and also from the United States in places like Puerto Rico and the Philippines, etc. There was the community development was very much the game in play. It was seen as a multidisciplinary approach for providing technical support at community level and a participatory approach. There was an emphasis right from the beginning that the people, that the development practitioners working with the community development programs, they should have an absolutely central say in determining what those development programs are. There was, as I've said, a focus at that time within the society, the international society, upon this post-colonial period in the 50s and early 60s. We also see at this time the society getting involved in some of the early professional community development training programs. You must remember in the 1950s, there were very few professionally trained community development practitioners, very, very few. So the society played a role in that, it produced training materials, and we saw, again, Biddle and Batten in particular, playing a very leading role in some of the early professionalization. It ran conferences with the United Nations in India, Iran, Libya, Ceylon, the US. I've not found any others. Now, I see Jim Robinson is here. And I remember Jim many years ago telling me he'd actually attended one of these conferences. So I don't know where that was. But they were quite influential. I know just Nehru, the Prime Minister of India, for example, was the keynote speaker at the Indian conference. And it encouraged governments in post-colonial countries to set up community development departments, and advised on this, and also trained what were called community development officers. Now, in the latter 60s, Biddle and Batten, and there were others. I'm focusing on these two because they're probably well known, but Batten went on to set up the Community Development Journal, which you may be familiar with, published by Oxford University Press, and Biddle went on to established the Journal of Community Development, published by the American Community Development Society. And I think you've got a period of sort of reflection and the growth of our academic discipline, the recognition of community development as an academic, multidisciplinary field. However, there was some disillusionment, particularly within those developing countries across Africa, Asia, India in particular, in community development programs, particularly the sort of Anglo-American type of programs and the over Anglo-American influence. Failure to deliver real growth and social economic development. And it was seen perhaps as a sort of trickle-down development model. We also saw at that period in the late 60s, early 70s, I'm not sure exactly when, that the closure of the community development section within the United Nations. So in a sense, it went off the boil. However, it went off the boil just at a time when community development ideas, methods, practice start to gain traction in the developed world. The American War on Poverty. There's a lot of countries, Nordic countries, the Netherlands, Britain, Ireland. There was a growth in the late 60s and the 70s of interest in community development within the development world. And you actually saw, I think what you saw at that period, a lot of energy and emphasis amongst practitioners went upon setting up national associations. So less was put into the international body and more was put into the national association. So the Community Development Society of the United States was set up in '67, the Association of Community Workers in Britain, 1968, the Australian Association set up in 1969, and many, many more, and you have them across the African continent as well. And it was about that time, also very sadly, Biddle died in 1972. And I think that whole early generation, that first third of our history, which was driven by really, as always, as Margaret Mead told us, as always, it just takes a handful of people to organize change. A lot of that generation were retiring and moving on, or in the case of Biddle, sadly dying. One of the members of the society was the Belgian government and the province of Hainaut in Belgium, and also a lot of interest from the University of Louvain. And there had been an emerging practice of community development in the Francophone world from the 1960s. This association was known really by its French name, the Association Internationale pour le Développement Communautaire. We know what that means in English, the International Association for Community Development. But it was a predominantly Francophone organization, and they took over the secretariat of the previous international society. Sometime, again, I think it was around about 1973. I don't have the exact date of this. And as I say, it had a really heavy focus on the Francophone countries around the world, in Africa, in the Caribbean, and Southeast Asia. While you found a lot of the sort of Anglophone players were focusing on setting up their national infrastructure. And for 2 decades, it was led by Professor Rudolf Rezahazi. And Rezahazi, originally from Hungary, but had got out in 1956 when the Russians invaded, and became a Belgian citizen and a respected academic. Now, again, we're unsure of its membership structure. Basically, people, well, I'll come on to talk about that. People subscribe to a journal which they set up called COM, and also they attended conferences. So if you like, its membership structure was made up of those databases, the subscription lists, and the people who went to their periodic conferences. They ran conferences, for example, in your region, in Egypt, Senegal, South Africa, and Rwanda. Some of you may have participated in some of those. They also provided a clearinghouse on information for undergraduate training courses. That's where I really picked up on them. I was a community development lecturer in the late 70s, and I remember we submitted our course to that clearinghouse, and that's where we could find about other professional training courses around the world. And I was also a subscriber to their journal. The other thing that this second phase of our history, it retained the recognized accredited status with the United Nations. So it carried that torch with us, and therefore had the right to attend consultative meetings as an international non-governmental professional association. However, there was a concern from the mid-1980s as to how representative this organization was. Now, we're not making, this is not a criticism of the Belgians at all. They were putting a lot of their energy and effort into it, but clearly they were not embracing community development more broadly around the world. And just to give you an example of that, its board was all male, all white, and all Belgian. So it was not an elected board from the field. We discovered that. I have to say it's quite an opaque organization. I approached them in the late 1980s. I was by then European director of an organization called the Community Development Foundation. And we were wanting to run a big pan-European conference on community development in the autumn of 1989, the end of the Cold War period. And I approached them, went over to their office and asked them if they'd like to make a presentation about community development internationally, which they did. And it wasn't bad, but I think you could sense it was something not quite right. It wasn't as, it didn't have an energy that maybe the earlier period had got. I managed to get onto the board, but in doing so, I was also, just as an aside, on the board of the Oxford University Press Community Development Journal, which was north, south, east, west. It had on its board practitioner academics from around the world. And I went and said to them, look, this organization, IACD, or in its French name, was representing us at the United Nations, claiming to speak on behalf of community development practice. And yet there was something not quite right about it. So we then sought places. We got additional places on the board. Cut a long story short, we closed the organisation down. We set up Part 3, the new organisation that you know and love, which is now has its headquarters in Scotland. Now, we were able to provide a secretariat for it, a number of organisations, Scottish-based organisations, including the Scottish Government, City of Dundee, the Carnegie Foundation, etc., put money and in-kind support in. We agreed that we would take over the accredited status at the United Nations, but no funds and no archives were transferred, although we sought them. So I'm afraid we had to start from afresh. And if anybody knows a PhD student who would like to really research and delve and try and find some of these archives, I'm sure we'd all like to see that. But what we felt, we set up an interim group really from the Community Development Journal. It was made up of members of that, people like Gary Craig, Marge Mayo, people you may know. And we decided from the outset, this new organisation must be transparent, it must be diverse in its membership, it must be eclectic, recognising all the traditions of community development, the Frerian tradition, the Alinsky tradition, the municipal role, the governmental role, the non-governmental role, the community development corporations, the business role, the asset-based community development, all these different traditions. We wanted to embrace them to be as eclectic as possible, and that the board should be as broad and diverse as possible. And I know there have been constitutional changes, but I know that's very much in the spirit of what IACD is all about. We felt it was vital that the International Association, if it had any right to speak at consultations with the UN or other bodies like the EU or the World Health Organization or whatever, it had to have antennae to the field. It had to have links to national bodies, to the various networks that existed. It couldn't just float at the top and not give recognition and respect and honour the work that was going on locally and nationally. It's absolutely vital that place. I mean, we did look at various structures. We looked at the way the International Federation of Social Workers is structured. I don't know if any of you are members of that. That's where a practitioner will join their national association, and then the national association joins the international body. So there's essentially an indirect involvement, but we decided to have direct participation. You could be an activist, you could be a trained practitioner, you could be a policy advisor, academic, researcher, whatever, from all different fields, all different disciplines, as long as you had a commitment to community development. So antennae to the field was important, and the way we tried to embed that was through regional, what we called regional directors, who would take a responsibility for their region to promote the association, to learn about what was going on within their region. So we had that antennae to the field. We also experimented with country correspondence, and the idea was just to do exactly the same, to have really good antennae to the field and to bring news up so that the secretariat in Scotland would be able to, have newsletters. We ran conferences almost every year, and this is in contrast to the Belgian-based one, where it was basically every 2 or 3 years. And I think looking back, there have been about 20 conferences now, which has been a heck of a lot of hard work. They've always been held in partnership with a national body, often a national association network, and that's always been part of the deal. And some of those have come out with declarations, which is essentially sort of policy position that IAC took on a particular issue at the time. We also had a memorandum of understanding with the Community Development Journal that it would be our partner journal, and it is, I believe, still today. And that was good. In the early days, we actually produced some special issues of CDJ with the IACD logo on it that came out of papers from IACD conferences. So it was a great source of quality work that could be fed into CDJ that was always looking for. Later on, we produced a practitioner-focused magazine, Practice Insights, which is still going strong, 20 issues or so. launched practice study visits. The first one was in Cuba, and there have been quite a lot organized since. We attended many attended many meetings of the UN or UN bodies in Geneva and in New York. And probably the one where we invested most time was the Sustainable Development Goals, where we had representatives from North America who attended the consultative meetings at the United Nations. And then we also attended the actual launch. I was over for that. And we had a roadshow events to raise the profile of what the SDGs meant for community development policy and practice. And the idea there was also, we felt the SDGs were an important way of raising the profile of the importance of participatory community development practice. It was absolutely vital that particularly because we all knew, you all know, that this is a 70 years where we've had ups and downs in terms of funding. The spread of neoliberalism saw significant cutbacks in government and municipal funding for community development programs, huge cutbacks. And we've seen many wonderful staff losing their jobs, skilled staff losing their jobs. So we know it's been a difficult time. We felt the SDGs, that agenda 2015 to 2030 was one we wanted to really link up with. We then came out with a global statement on community development at the Minnesota conference, really re-emphasizing what our early pioneers had said, that we're a multidisciplinary practice-based profession and that we're an academic discipline. And then we produced the international standards, launched at the Maynooth conference and published now, I believe, in about a dozen languages. I mean, Anna was very, very centrally involved in this as well. So I think that's probably where I'll end. I say this has been an exciting 70 years of ups and downs in 3 different parts, but there has been a link and overlap between those parts. And we've tried to fly the flag for all of us as a movement internationally. And the fact we're still here shows, when many national associations have collapsed, shows that people find we're a useful organization to be a part of. Thank you, Janine.
Wonderful. Thank you, Charlie. That's really, really interesting. Wonderful to see, as you say, the growth and the change over the years. And what I love the most is that real focus on proper representation globally and inclusiveness and you know, that whole eclectic thing. And I think that's where the success and the value of IACD comes from today, is that people feel truly part of it and feel truly represented no matter where they are. So that's wonderful. Thank you. Maybe Jim can answer Charlie's question about what conference it was that you attended way back. Sorry, just unmute yourself.
One of the very early conferences where was the first time that the World Federation of Democratic Youth for the first time came out of the Soviet Union, and they held a conference in Vienna, and there were kind of 2 sides there, literally 2 sides. So those who were arguing for the kind of things that Charlie's been talking about, you know, and those that were coming with a much more, you know, influence coming from kind of Soviet side, and to such an extent, for example, that those who actually came representing at that time East Germany all came with the same suit. They all wore the same suit. So you would have 1,000 people, you know, because the total number at the conference was 23,000, which was big numbers. But quite a few of the American people who came, who had an interest in community development, actually found it difficult to get back into America because they were seen to be, you know, cooperating with, you know, with the Soviet section. So McCarthyism and all that thing, you know, was there. So anyway,
sure. Interesting.
We were obviously much younger than we are now.
Thanks, Jim. Thank you for that. Right, Anna, over to you.
Okay, thanks very much. And thank you, Daniel and Janine, for giving me the opportunity. I thought I was just manning or staffing the hosting of the Zoom call. But anyway, a few words on behalf of IACD today. and into the future, I suppose. If it's okay, what I would like to do is maybe just show a few slides, Janine, just to give a little bit of a flavour of IACD currently. So thinking about where IACD is today, sorry, that's not the one I wanted, here we go. Today, IACD has about 600 members, give or take. That is a fluid figure around the world, and we have a sizable percentage of those who are students, which is really positive given that the future is in young people in our world. So encouraging and engaging with young people who are involved in studying and learning about community development as a field of practice and a career is something that we really want to encourage. Today, IACD is a Scottish charitable incorporated organisation, so that's our legal status. We went through a process of changing our legal structure in 2021. That was adopted by our membership at the AGM that year. That's a relatively new legal structure, and it simplifies the process for us of all the legal side of being an organisation and also reporting. And through that process, we have enshrined the position of having 20 places for global trustees on the board. And I'll show you the regional diversity of those in a few minutes. But the work of the organisation is all processed through primarily those trustees and a number of active members who have joined our committees. And we have 4 broad committee areas: the Executive Committee, the Membership, Communications and Marketing Committee, Training, Publications, Professional Development, and the International and National Relations. So all the work that flows from our current strategy is processed through those committees and is supported by just 1 part-time member of staff. And so everything else is undertaken on a voluntary basis. And as has been pointed out, we are based organisationally in Scotland, have been now for 25 years or thereabouts, and we receive a relatively modest grant from the Scottish Government, which we are very appreciative of. But for a global organisation, I think we do achieve a lot with a modest structure and income, which is obviously supplemented as well by our membership fees. So who are the trustees? I think this is a really interesting slide to demonstrate, because sometimes at a regional level, people might be familiar with the trustees within their own region, but not necessarily the full picture across all the global regions where we have representation from. So you can see here, you will recognise some of the people who are on this slide, and some of them are here today: Daniel, Catherine, Janine. But we have a global representation from each of the global regions, and our constitution seeks to ensure that we have an upper limit on the number of trustees that can represent any one region. And we also ensure that we protect at least 1 place for each global region as well. So there are times when there might be a region without a trustee, but that place remains vacant, so that when the opportunity arises for someone to come forward, there is vacant space there for them. And we recruit our trustees, our fixed term contracts. I'm sounding very job speak at the minute, fixed terms of office. So there is a rolling process of recruitment. So if it's something in the future that you think you might be interested in, on an annual basis, we go through a recruitment process to replace trustees who are leaving and new ones coming forward. And the diversity of those global voices is something that is really fundamentally important to us in 2023 and moving forward. So that connects very much with our current strategy, and it outlines our vision, our mission, our values, and our key areas of operational work. This is the document that's on our website, so if it's not something that you're familiar with, you'll be able to find it there, and it will give you more of a flavour of what the work of IACD looks like on an annual basis, and we report on this in our annual report and at the AGM as well, which is open to all our members. So IACD, as has been highlighted by Charlie, it's very much a network for global community development practitioners, and that is the core focus of the activity of all of our work as well. It is about facilitating that knowledge and practice exchange at a regional level, at an international level, but also at a countrywide level as well. We encourage it across all of those different spheres. Our purpose is to promote the value-based community development as a practice, in other words, as a way of working with communities, particularly in terms of professional practice for people employed to work as community development practitioners, but also as a discipline, an academic discipline that we engage with in terms of learning, skills development and critical analysis as well, and support opportunities for that learning formally and informally in a variety of ways. All of our work, as is the practice and profession of community development, is underpinned by a set of values. Those values are articulated within the definition of community development that IACD engaged with its membership around back in 2016. But we have also taken that further in more recent years and identified clearly what we believe those values to mean. So they come now in our strategy with an explanation about how we understand those values. And again, they're outlined in our strategy and shape and inform the work of the organisation. And that work currently flows through 5 strategic areas of priority. And under each of these, there are a set of more specific actions. So, for example, in terms of priority 1, where the focus is around the advocating, hard word to say, of the discipline and the practice and the methods of community development, and promoting those, then our activities are geared towards doing that through practice insights, for example, knowledge exchange, practice exchange visits, the global conferences, which if you're newer to IACD and perhaps have become involved since the pandemic, then you'll be familiar with the online conferences. But historically, IACD has organised face-to-face in-person conferences internationally and more locally and regionally as well. So coming forward this year, which is one of the reasons why I was feeling optimistic and excited, is the fact that we have the Darwin Conference in Northern Australia in June, which is our first face-to-face global conference since 2019, when it took place in Dundee. And going back to speak about, that's all the slides I wanted to show, so I'm just going to stop sharing that. Just going back to the emphasis on the diversity of global voices. The Darwin Conference for us is a really important step forward in our 70th year. I'm absolutely delighted to say, a huge contribution being played by people from First Nations communities, and an opportunity for us to really learn about community development practice in the greatest diversity of contexts. Moving forward in our 70th year, we also want to put greater emphasis on how we can strengthen and embed the diversity of voices in IACD, and moving that beyond simply a group of 20 trustees to a much wider and an ongoing consultative structure and mechanism. So we're looking to support the establishment of a number of thematic consultative groupings that will meet on an ongoing basis and inform and shape the work of the organisation, and particularly contribute to the development of our new strategy, which we'll be bringing forward in 2024. So that membership engagement is something that is absolutely fundamental, and ensuring that's much flatter in terms of how it operates as well. And then the other thing to highlight as far as our 70th anniversary is the other ways in which we want to involve members in celebrating that, but also thinking about the future too. And that is through a variety of events that we have planned. Some of those are online, such as this, for example, but within other regions. Each month we have allocated a blog to each global region. So Sub-Saharan Africa kicked that off last month with a wonderful blog. This month that's going to be produced by the Oceania trustees and members. And each month has a global region associated with it. So look out for those. If you have areas of practice around your work that you would like to share, get in touch with us. We have instituted our bi-monthly membership email bulletin as well. And that's proving to be a really positive way for us to engage more directly with members on an ongoing basis from month to month. And we're getting a lot of ideas and suggestions and contributions coming back. And there are other things planned as well. Some of those are something of a surprise, so I'm not going to go into all of that detail yet. But I think it is a lot to be optimistic and feel positive and bright about, bringing it back to Janine's opening question. And I'm absolutely delighted to have been have the opportunity to be with you this morning to share some of that from our point of view as well. So I'll leave it there, Janine. Thank you very much, and over to everybody else. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. Yeah, it's an exciting year, and there's lots of things on the go. So yeah, keep in touch and keep a lookout for everything. Daniel, can we hear from you just a few minutes, 2 minutes or so, of what's going on in this wonderful region of ours? Thank you.
Thank you, Janine, and colleagues. Thank you very much. Let's appreciate the presentations by Charlie, our past president, and Anna, our current chair of the Board of Trustees. Well, in this side of the world, there is so much belief in divine intervention in the way things happen. And in as much as within the board's planning of celebrating 70 years of IACD, each region had been given a slot to do a blog. We did our bit as a region, and it is already on the website, which you can interact with and see what some of the things that we have said about our contribution to the celebration of IACD at 70. Then we had also thought about setting apart one of the slots in our webinar series just to reflect on IACD at 70. And we set apart the month of April to be the month when we just reflect as a region on IACD at 70. Normally we invite volunteers to present during each of the webinar series, but again, divine intervention edit that we are going to have the best of the presenters come in place. Charlie saw, I think, promotion of our webinar series online, and he got in touch, said he would be interested to make a contribution on the history. And then administrative issues came up, and then we had to be technically hosted by the chair of the Board of Trustees. And that, of course, presented the greatest opportunity again, also to hear our chair talk about IACD going forward. And so we had presenters presented to us by divine coincidence, and well, those are the best you could get and that we can have as a region. And we are honored to have the past president and the chair of IACD with us. Mine is not really to say much. It's just to get us to reflect on where we are as IACD in the region, taking into account that as you celebrate the 70 years as a region, again, as is already Anna has indicated, then the numbers tell a lot. And in terms of membership, the region contributes 33% of the total membership of IACD. And so if you are talking about IACD, then in terms of numbers, then we are a region that occupies a huge constituency, 33% of the membership. Amongst, of course, our membership, about half of the membership is students, 49.4%, again, indicating a lot of potential going forward. So even as we celebrate 70 years, we know, again, we are going to carry IACD going forward if we continue to cultivate this kind of membership that we have in the region going forward. And that means then IACD has a great future invested in the membership that we already have, interesting half of our membership in the students who continue to be engaged with us. In terms of in the footprint in the region, IACD again in the region is represented in 20 of the 50 Sub-Saharan African countries, or we can say 20 out of the 55 African countries, which again is, and Africa is huge. If again, we are represented in 20 countries and the numbers continue increasing, including in the Francophone countries, we are heavily represented, which is a great move for us. And these numbers, again, also, if they say much, Anna has already shared a slide about the leadership of IACD. Africa has 5 trustees on the board. And so the challenge for us in the region is to have these numbers count as we promote the mission of IACD and as we promote the cause of community development, discipline, and practice. Because ultimately, our flagship has been the webinar series, but there's a lot more that we need to look at. And as Anna has indicated, what we need to look at is how do we promote the networking so that then ultimately the mission of IACD remains alive and also the cause for community development remains relevant. One of the issues, again, that is of critical importance is that the discipline, and the organization has carried the discipline for 70 years. And 70 years is more than a lifetime in some of the places where life expectancy is so short. And getting IACD to survive this long, it means then, one, some people have been devoted, have been committed to disciple the mission of IACD. The challenge is to us, are we going to let the ball down, or do we redouble our efforts to continue to promote IACD in the cause for community development? Equally, IACD must have been serving a cause that has an enduring value for generations of practitioners and communities that we serve. We need to be able to rediscover that is holding thread that is making IACD so relevant and of so interest over the years. And then this longevity is something that I think we need also to promote. And so going forward, as we were setting up this, the theme for today is really to ask ourselves, how do we continue to engage going forward within the region and also vertically with IACD so that we can remain vibrant. And I want to leave it at that, and back to Janine.
Thank you, Daniel. Yes, it's a lovely region to be involved in. I must say, I love my Sub-Saharan African colleagues. So I think as Anna puts us into various groups, let's just spend a moment to think about what is our engagement with IACD and the community development discipline and practice going forward. What are the kind of things that we could focus on going forward, having looked back at the history, thinking of how things are now, and specifically focusing on this region? How would we engage with IACD and community development as a discipline and as a practice in our region so that we can really build and focus on those strategies and the goals and the vision that Anna outlined for us? So I think we are 20 people So perhaps we could have 4 or 5 groups, Anna. And we'll give ourselves 15 minutes, and then we'll come back and share our pearls of wisdom together. Who would like to kick off? What juicy little nuggets did some of the groups come up with? Shall I share what our group took? Daniel, go for it.
Okay, let me just start. Thank you very much. I was in a group with Dr. Abdu from Nigeria, Elizabeth from Kenya, and Charlie from Spain. And had some reflection, and I think about 4 points or so come out, how we can really enhance our networking. And one of the things that's coming through is that where there is no infrastructure or established mechanisms for engagement, of course, people start operating in atomic manner, and at times they can get disillusioned. And so one of the things that appear to be important is that we need possibly to establish or revamp national associations where they exist or they don't exist, and set up some mechanisms for networking, so some infrastructure to facilitate networking. And at least from where I sit, having the IACD South African WhatsApp wall has made a huge difference in terms of mobilizing our membership. Of course, there's a lot more that can be done. I was sharing the experience that half of the membership, or close to half of the membership in our region is from Nigeria. And we kept on getting issues that are only uniquely Nigerian, until at some point then we set up a small WhatsApp group for the Nigerian brothers, where now those issues are discussed. But of course, now that we are members, then that makes it very easy to mobilize. Because again, for quite some time in this webinar series, because of course, we always have challenges in telling what time it is. And so I would always get our brothers from Nigeria saying, look, I wanted to join the webinar, but now the message is coming at 1, because them they are coming at 11 a.m. Nigerian time, when actually it's supposed to be 11 a.m. Nairobi time, and so Nigeria is slightly earlier. But now when we have this IACD Nigeria WhatsApp group, that problem disappeared completely, and so we have that kind of gelling together. Then the other issue that came out is that in terms of enhancing our presence in all these many agencies that operate in Africa, and taking from the fact that we have the accreditation with the UN, again, we can also see how we can leverage on the numbers that we have in the region, also to make our presence count in the agencies that operate in this region. We have the United Nations Environmental Program headquartered in Nairobi. We have regional offices in Addis Ababa and a few other countries in the region. And so we can also leverage on that, also to be able to articulate on some of the issues that are important in community development. We have a robust community development training programs in this region, and is evidenced by the huge number of student members in IACD. And this is something, again, that we can leverage on, so that then we can be able then also to have a great footprint going forward. And that lastly, the issue of trying to map out the kind of expertise, community development expertise that we have in the region, and then be able to see how we can leverage on this one. Then again, to be the rally, to have a rallying call in terms of our presence. And then, of course, lastly is we always participate in many forums, conferences, webinars, and all that. And we need always to carry the flag of IACD with us, so that then, again, that should make a difference. Thank you, Janine.
Thank you. Thanks, Daniel. So maybe I'll pick up on that, because that was our first point as well, is that we were saying wherever we are in our own space, whether it's our community or our workspace or wherever, we need to be carrying that IACD flag and marketing the organization and getting new members in. We also talked about training and the importance that IACD has a huge voice in in determining the kind of structure and content really for community development training globally. And so we should carve a niche for ourselves in the whole kind of global picture of what is community development, and especially the idea of professionalizing it. Not that we want to ring fence it, but I think stating it as a profession, slightly different to social work, for instance, because for myself, I studied social work at university, but I'm involved in ABCD work, which is very much community development, participatory, so on. And I look back at the curriculum that's still happening in South Africa in social work, and it's so outdated, and they haven't really, ABCD is kind of mentioned as something before afternoon tea, you know, like it's not a, to me, it should be like the core of community development curricula throughout the world, because that's my passion. But I mean, obviously I can't impose that on everyone, but I do believe that this is the way forward. And then Kachi mentioned as well that we sort of feel like government knows what they're doing and that they are the ones that should be leading us. But as he was saying, if you know how to do something, just do it and government will follow because they're like bees in a pot of honey. If they see something being successfully done, and he's involved in certain projects in Ghana and so on, and he says he just does it, and government officials come there because they want to share in that limelight and they want to be involved so that it looks like they were part of something. So I think, and for me, I've done a lot of training in ABCD with government officials here, and one of the provinces has now officially adopted ABCD into their 2030 strategy. So, you know, it's that kind of thing. We know what we're talking about. We know what we are all about, and we should be brave and just take the mic and go forward and preach the message, and we will find governments and other people following us. So that was really what came out of our group. Any other groups would like to share? What did you come up with? Yes, Romel, did you want to comment?
I just wanted to share what we have discussed earlier. So hello everyone, I'm Romel from the Philippines, and I'm a fourth-year student taking a Bachelor of Science in Community Development. So actually, I'm currently on my field practicum where we now apply the community development practice in the community level. So I have shared earlier in our group that the Philippines is basically composed of Department of Social Welfare, the Department of Social Welfare Office, but then we are the community development profession is being disregarded because of the social work profession. So with that, there is a need to really inform the government that community development is very relevant and needed in the community, because social work and community development are two different professions that perform with the different tasks in the community. Like for instance, the community development profession that I am currently having. So we are in the grassroots level where we are engaging in the community people. So we get to know the lifestyle, we get to know the experiences of the people in the community living with. So I am assigned in the province, or I'm currently assigned in a mountain area where people are lack of social services and they cannot reach, the government cannot reach them. So we as a community development worker by future profession, we should bridge the gap between the community people who cannot be reached by the social services that the government offer. So, and also there is an instance that the oppressors are the government itself, and also the oppressors are the capitalists, where the community people cannot fully express their capabilities because of these oppressors. So that is why community development profession is very vital and it's very crucial, especially in performing their profession in the field of their expertise. That's all.
Wonderful, wonderful. There's the voice of the youth, the community development future for us. Fantastic. Thanks, Romel. That's lovely. Any other comments? Melchiad.
Yeah. Our group, and I want to let you know I'm French speaker, but I can try to speak in French, in English. We discussed in our group what can advance IACD. We discussed about engagement of membership, encouraging networking, put action into action IACD values. Let's know the IACD existence to non-IACD members, especially YAF and NGOs engaged.
Lost you there.
I have unstable internet.
Okay.
And I was saying, let's know the IACD existence to non-IACD members, especially YAF and NGOs engaged in community development. That's all what we discussed.
Excellent. Thank you. Merci beaucoup. So you are echoing the thing about marketing, marketing and getting new members in by telling other people about the existence of IACD. That's such an important thing that each one of us can do. You don't have to be a trustee. You don't have to be the IACD chair. It's something that every single one of us can be doing and should be doing in our daily lives. Any other comments?
I just say one thing. It's in
Sure.
relation to our friend from Burundi. I think I'm right in saying, Anna can correct me, but I think the first translation of the standards was in French. And so hopefully that's the international standards for community development practice. Because there was a recognition that, you know, there are a lot of countries, particularly in Sub-Saharan Africa, where, I mean, obviously there are national languages, indigenous languages, but where French is the lingua franca, so to speak, rather than English. I mean, it is always difficult for an international organization that doesn't have much money to translate everything it is. But I've certainly found, I don't know what Anna's views would be on this, that Google Translate has got much, much better. And if you Google Translate, use the little button on the IACD website, it's actually translated pretty well. Spanish, for example. I mean, there are a lot of mistakes still, but it is much, much better. So I think it's just obviously being aware that, you know, there are so many languages around and to be sensitive to that.
Yeah, no, definitely. Thank you. I'm aware of the time that we have about 4 minutes left before the 11:30. So I just think, I think we have so much to look forward to, and we have so much going for us going forward from that beautiful, rich history. Thank you so much, Charlie. That was so informative. Our group was all raving about the depth of information that you had given us, because it was, you know, many of us just come in where we come in and we don't look backwards, we look forwards only. So it was wonderful to see that rich history. Thank you for that. And I think, yes, looking forward and going ahead, we have so much to be grateful for and so much to be hopeful about, like we think about those words that we started with. So I think maybe just in closing, those of you who would like to do a checkout question to say, what is it that excites you about IACD going forward? If we think of everything we've heard about and all the options that we are talking about, what is it that excites you about being an IACD member going into the future?
I think basically we should all look to the future with a great deal of enthusiasm in terms of improving upon the practice of community development in the global context. Those of us from SSA countries, I think we should be more involved in engendering awareness to a very great extent. And this comes in different dimensions. As we mentioned earlier, training is the issue. Awareness and publicity is also another vital issue we need to confront frontally. So I think the bottom line really from my side is that we have if we were to do a SWOT analysis, I think we have a great deal of opportunities in placing IACD on the global map across the entire countries of Africa and other parts of the world. So I think the bottom line really is that we have very active membership, even though the number may not compare with other professional bodies. But I think we are very, very active, and we have what it takes to take the world by storm. So looking to the future, I want to share my enthusiasm with all of us so that we can do quite a lot of innovative things that will place us where we belong. 70 years is a lifetime, as Daniel mentioned. So we must build on this. We must build on this. We must leverage on this, because for an association to be in existence for 70 years cannot be taken as child's play. So I want to share enthusiasm with the team, the leadership of IACD Global, those of us that are members in various parts of the world, Asia, Africa, Europe, etc. We must look forward to the future with a great deal of dedication, commitment, and enthusiasm. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, I think thinking about it from an ABCD perspective, communities have the answers for themselves. And I think it's Africa's time to share with the world. And COVID, in a way, has been a bizarre kind of a blessing that we are now able to connect so much more easily through Zoom and through these kind of platforms. And I think, you know, there's lessons to be learned from the ground. And maybe this is the chance, is that we need to be sharing the community development message globally and saying, like Prof is saying, get it into curricula, get it into sort of use the standards, use our strategies, our goals, our aspirations and our vision, so that we can share this common message about community development, that it comes, the people have the answers themselves, and we need to be listening more to people on the ground. Other comments, closing comments. What are you taking forward into the IACD future? Teresa Adekola, we haven't heard from you. Anything to share? Just
sorry,
unmute.
I was trying to write. Okay, I would love a session where we'll have a comparative studies among countries. That will go a long way. We can look at different issues, how it's being done in a particular country, and maybe Nigeria and other countries. We can do a comparative studies. We can just choose a particular theme or a particular topic, and you will try to see how it's being done in different countries.
Excellent, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Abdul.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you.
Yeah, for an association to have come up to 70 years, I think it's a great achievement for IACD. And I must commend the leadership of IACD from different stages of right from the evolution of IACD up to now. And what we should look forward is that the future is great. Someone that have stayed for 70 years and without, as Charlie has said, many groups in Europe have just fall out. They cannot survive again. But for IACD to survive is a commendable thing to the leadership. And to us here in Sub-Saharan Africa region, where community development is very, very important, because community development is the answer, because it's the grassroots where communities can have access to so many things, where they can participate, where they will have empowerment of so many things. So I think ours will be, more emphasis on community development. And again, practitioners should put more effort, and academicians should even encourage, community development in schools, even at the graduate level. So I think it's a commendable association, and we, ask God to, to give us the will and to give the leadership the will to continue carrying the association forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Abdul.
Yeah, hello. Can I just chip in a word?
Second,
please?
Abdul. Yes.
Yeah. I think one of the big lessons is that we should not allow the labor of our heroes get past or wasted. That means those that sustain the association up to this level should be commended, and then we should push more so that we can be able to achieve more. And in the case of the Sub-Saharan region, we should go back and think about how to convert the student membership into full-fledged membership so that we can also reap from the benefit of their experience. And then we should remember the ABCD of community development so that we can be able to reap the harvest also in terms of making our communities better. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Abdul. Daniel, would you like to make some closing comments? Oh, Samaila.
Well, yes, I'm happy and empowered with all that I've heard regarding IACD right from its cradle till now. And I am so excited to be a part of this association because I believe that I'm at the right place where I'll be groomed and nurtured into delivering my best at community development. Thank you.
Wonderful. We love having you with us. Fantastic.
Okay, Janine, thank you very much. And colleagues, I think we need to give ourselves a round of applause for a webinar so well engaging and spending so much of our energies just to discuss something so important. An organization living for 70 years and beyond, and we are part of it. It is a choice that I think is validated, that the moment we chose to become members of this association, I think this is the moment when this becomes true, and we need just to congratulate ourselves. So a round of applause to ourselves and to IACD. And we can say happy 70 years to IACD. But when we celebrate, well, it's a season, and I'm so grateful again for our leadership in IACD. Celebrating 70 years would easily have just become an event, a one-day event, actually a one-hour event, and that's the end of it. But here we are celebrating for a whole year. And for us in Africa, we celebrated as we put our blog together into March. And now we have had this occasion, and we're still going to have more occasions to celebrate with everybody else in the other regions all the way up to the end of the year, including in Darwin. So thank you very much. You have made my worst fears become my best moment of excitement, because I kept on wondering when I was putting IACD at 70 April as the topic for the webinar series, what was going to happen. But now here we are running beyond even the allotted hours, time of 1.5 hours. So thank you so much for making it the greatest moment for our region in this webinar series. Going forward, the next topic is professionalizing community development. And that's a topic for May 10th, 2023. I can see some of the members of the subcommittee that was working on this topic, just preparing a background presentation. And so we'll need to convene and polish what we have. I know DeWitt shared something. We need to look at it, and then so that we are ready by the time we come into May, then we have something to discuss. I know this is a topic that is a bit sensitive because in some quarters when you talk about professionalizing, there is always the fear that we are ring-fencing the discipline. But we are trying to create a situation where we can have a sound practice of community development undergirded by values and ethics. And of course, then the training bits systematized. But that will be the discussion. You are welcome on May 10th at 11 Nairobi time, 9 a.m. UK time, and whatever time now that translates to in your region. And then again, from IACD, let me again invite you. We are going to Darwin in June for World Community Development Conference 2023. The registration is still open. Let's meet for the first time after this disruption of COVID, and they celebrate each other and they celebrate our discipline. Thank you very much, and have a nice day, nice evening, whatever your time.
Thank you, Daniel and Janine. Wonderful webinar. Take care, everybody.
Thank you very much, and thanks for sharing.
And thanks again, Charlie, for your gems of wisdom.
It's not every day you are hosted by the president and the chair of the IACD Board of Trustees, but we are this special. Thank you very much.
Bye, everybody.